Hi, I'm Anjelica. The day my sister kicked my daughter out of the house while I was away wasn't the beginning. It was the final crack in a foundation that had been crumbling for years. Before that, they used my name for money, called it help. Said I should be grateful to be needed. But when did being family mean being used? Have you ever felt like your silence was mistaken for permission? Let me know. I had almost forgotten how quiet the house could be on a Sunday afternoon. The same filtered sunlight slanted through the kitchen blinds, the same lemon-scented candle burned halfway down. Mom, no, Irene, sat across from me at the kitchen table, phone in hand, frowning at the login screen of her banking app. She handed it over like she always had, like I'd always be the one who knew how to untangle her passwords and reset her codes. I smiled politely and typed without thinking. It was muscle memory at this point. Tea steamed between us. There were muffins cooling on a wire rack. To anyone passing by, it would have looked like the picture of two women at peace. But something itched beneath my skin. I found the issue in seconds, a security update. But what I found next wasn't part of the plan. A small tab marked scheduled transfers. I clicked, and there it was, $250 every Friday, labeled school expenses. Recipient? Jody. The email on the account? Mine. I blinked. Once, twice. It wasn't the amount. I could have handled the amount. It was the silence, the assumption, the fact that once again, something of mine had been used without my permission, like I was a function, not a person. I didn't say anything. I logged her out, closed the app, put the phone down gently on the table, and smiled. Later, as we washed the dishes together, I tried to be calm, to not accuse, just ask. I told myself it wasn't a fight. It was a clarification. Hey, Mom, did you mean to set up that transfer to Jody using my account? She didn't even look up from the dish in her hand, just dried it, set it aside, and said, "You've always been good with money. It's not a big deal, sweetheart." My hands paused under the water. She turned, drying her hands on the towel slowly. "Honestly, Anjelica, you always counted pennies, so different from your sister. She's generous like your father." And there it was, the soft twist of the knife, not even cruel, just familiar. "Jody has the kids, you have the means, it just makes sense. You always want to help, don't you?" I stared at the bubbles in the sink, at the back of her hands, at the tiny scar near her wrist she got from the oven rack when I was 9. I remember how I ran for the aloe. She said thank you then. She didn't say thank you now. I nodded, just once, like I understood. Later I went upstairs to the room I used to sleep in. The bedspread had changed, but the closet still creaked the same way. I opened the drawer of the old desk and found a scarf I'd left behind when I was 18. I held it up to my cheek. It still smelled faintly of dust and something floral. Old decisions, maybe. I remembered the night I left, after they told me my college fund would be better used on Jody's wedding. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just packed. That night, I left with silence. I came back with the same. At dinner, Irene passed around the potatoes, talking to Maura like she hadn't just erased my boundaries that morning. Victor nodded along absently. Then she said it, like it was nothing. "It's nice having your sister help us, isn't it?" She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at Maura, like I wasn't even there, like I was furniture with a credit score. Maura looked at me. Her eyes narrowed just a bit. I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I reached for my water and said softly, "I'll go check the bank again tomorrow." Because this time, I wouldn't leave quietly. Maura had always liked setting the table. She lined up the silverware with an almost ceremonial precision, folding the napkins into little triangles, just like I'd shown her years ago. Her voice was low, recounting a story about her science project to no one in particular, just the space between her and the plates. I stood at the edge of the kitchen, arms crossed, watching. The air smelled like roast chicken and rosemary, a scene that, from the outside, might have looked like a Norman Rockwell painting, except for the part where I could feel my jaw locking. She took the seat closest to Victor, placing her plate with care. She looked proud. That's when Irene walked in. "Let the little one sit here, honey. You're older now," she said, smiling like she was handing out a favor. Mora froze, blinked once, and nodded. She didn't speak. She slid her plate off the table and carried it into the kitchen, where no one else was seated. Not even me. I looked to Victor, hoping for something. A flicker, a shift. But he just cleared his throat and looked down at his glass. The dining room roared with the sound of Jody's children laughing, chewing with open mouths, kicking each other under the table. Irene clinked her glass with Jody's, beaming. Mora ate her dinner alone, facing the refrigerator. And I watched. Later that night, I sat in my car with the engine running, parked just down the street. The radio played a jazz station I didn't remember selecting. I stared at the streetlight, blinking red, then green, then red again. I told myself this wasn't like before, I whispered. That this was different, temporary. That she'd never feel what I felt. But she did, and I let it happen. I remembered one of my own birthdays, maybe my 12th. The cake had Jody's name piped in pink, mine added later in rushed blue icing that melted under the candles. I'd told myself it didn't matter, that at least I had cake. Maybe Mora was doing the same math in her head. 2 days later, I came home to the smell of something sweet and cheesy. Mora had cooked dinner. Mac and cheese with tomato soup, the kind she liked, the kind I made when she had a cold. She laid out the plates in the dining room and waited. Jody walked in, phone in hand. She sniffed once, loudly. "This is gross. Who made this?" Mora stepped forward just slightly. Jody didn't wait for an answer. She picked up the pot, walked it over to the trash can, and dumped the entire thing. Mora didn't cry. She didn't move. I did. That night, I found her on her bed, curled up with the old spiral-bound cooking book we made together years ago, pages stained with oil and cocoa. She traced a recipe with her finger like it was Braille. "Maybe I should have just let them eat first," she said without looking up. I sat beside her, ran a hand over her back. "Or maybe," I said, "they should have just said thank you." She nodded, still silent. After she fell asleep, I walked into the hallway and leaned against the wall. The house was quiet, too quiet. I opened my phone, logged into my bank app. Then I searched. Short-term apartment rentals near Pasadena. Mora twirled once in the yellow sundress I bought her last spring. It was a little short now, but she didn't seem to notice. She clutched a card she'd made, folded construction paper with glitter glue edges and a lopsided heart drawn in red crayon. "It's for the birthday girl," she told me, smoothing the card like it might wrinkle her good intentions. We stood in Irene and Victor's backyard, where pastel balloons danced in the breeze and barbecue smoke curled through the air. Folding chairs lined the edges of the grass. A long plastic table held lemonade, mismatched plates, and store-bought potato salad. Mara had spent all morning asking if Grandpa would like the story she was going to tell him, how she hoped he'd sit next to her. She wanted to show him her new notebook. I didn't tell her this party wasn't for her. When Victor arrived, he kissed Jody's daughter on the forehead, lifted her up, and spun her around. The guests clapped. He turned to Mora, patted her on the head, and said, "Good job, Ari." He kept walking. Mora blinked. The corners of her mouth twitched, just once. Then she sat down, quietly. No one said anything. Not Irene, not Jody, not even me. And that silence felt louder than any insult ever could. I watched Mora pick at her pasta salad. No one asked her to play the party games. She sat and smiled when prompted, nodded when spoken to, but her voice disappeared. And I didn't stop it. Because I'd lived it. I'd worn dresses like that. Too bright, too hopeful. I'd brought cards with glue still drying. I'd stood in rooms full of relatives who hugged Jody twice and looked through me once. I remembered one birthday in particular, a cake with both our names, but hers in cursive and mine an afterthought in blocky blue icing. When I asked why, Irene said, "At least you had something. Don't be ungrateful." And I hadn't been, not out loud. I had promised myself Mora would never learn that kind of silence, but here she was, living in it. As the sun dipped and Irene lit the citronella candles, she brought out the cake. One layer, pink frosting, candy letters that spelled, "Happy Birthday, Ari." Mora's eyes lit up, then dimmed. The cake was passed. Everyone clapped. Mora didn't ask why her name wasn't there. She didn't ask if there'd be another cake later. She just clapped too. After the guests left, Mora helped gather napkins and plastic forks. I stood at the sink, rinsing out lemonade pitchers. That night, in bed, Mora lay beside me, curled toward the wall. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. My heart ached, not because she asked, but because she asked so softly, like the answer might break her. "No," I whispered. "You just loved the wrong people a little too openly." She didn't speak again. After she fell asleep, I turned on my phone under the covers, opened the email draft I'd been holding in limbo for 3 weeks, the one addressed to the apartment manager. Subject line, requesting availability for immediate move-in. This time, I didn't hesitate. I hit send. The hoodie was gone. It was the one Mora and I had picked together for her birthday. Bright teal with tiny embroidered stars along the hood. She'd worn it only twice. I'd folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beneath her jeans. That morning, it wasn't there. "Maybe it's still in the wash," she said with a shrug, eyes down. But the laundry basket was empty, and my gut already knew better. That afternoon, the house smelled like crock-pot chili and floor cleaner. Irene was setting out crackers and sliced cheese on a tray like we were about to entertain royalty. Jody's kids ran up and down the hallway in socks. I leaned against the kitchen counter and watched Mora trail behind them like a shadow. It wasn't until Jody's daughter dashed into the room that the breath in my chest stilled. The girl was wearing Mora's hoodie, at least what used to be Mora's hoodie. The sleeves had been cut at the elbow. Glittery iron-on letters across the chest spelled out Queen Bee in uneven font. The stars were mostly gone. The teal looked faded, like someone had soaked it in vinegar. Mora stared for a moment, then looked away. I stepped forward. My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Is that—" Irene didn't blink. She outgrew it. Better than letting it go to waste. I opened my mouth, closed it. My hands clenched so tightly I felt the edges of my fingernails in my palm. We didn't talk about it. Not on the car ride home. Not at dinner. Mora barely touched her food. I tried to act normal. I asked about school. She mumbled something about a group project. Her eyes stayed on the table. That night, as I folded the towels, I thought about the prom shoes. I was 13 when Irene gave them to Jody. "She wears them better," she'd said. I hadn't even asked for them back. I just pretended I'd grown out of them. I think I'd learned early what not to want. And now, so had Mora. The hoodie wasn't the point. It never had been. It was the message behind it. You don't need this. She deserves it more. The next morning, Mora stood at the top of the stairs in a soft purple dress I'd gotten on sale last week. She looked radiant, her hair in a simple braid, small hoop earrings she picked herself. Irene glanced up from her coffee and smiled in that way she did when she was about to say something awful and call it kindness. "Sweetheart, maybe wear something simpler today. We don't want Ari to feel less than, right?" Mora's hands went to the hem of her dress. She didn't cry, didn't frown. She just nodded and turned around. When she came down again, she was wearing last year's sweater, stretched, pilled, a faded stain near the elbow, and jeans 2 inches too short. At dinner, no one noticed the change. But I did. Later that night, I went to put away her backpack and found her school notebook lying open on the bed. In the corner of a page, written so lightly, I almost missed it. Maybe if I looked smaller, they'd stop pretending I wasn't there. I sat on the edge of her bed, that sentence echoing in my ribs. I picked up my phone, closed the grocery app, opened my contacts, scrolled until I found it. Real estate manager? And pressed call. It started like all her soft commands did. Wrapped in a smile, offered like kindness. "You're always so tired," Irene said, folding a dish towel in the kitchen while I stirred sugar into my coffee. "Why not take a few weeks off work? Help Jody with the little ones. You're so good with kids." I blinked once. The coffee was bitter, too strong. I swallowed anyway. It wasn't a request. It was a redirection. A demotion disguised as concern. I nodded, murmured something non-committal, and drove Mora to school in silence. She hummed to herself in the passenger seat, unaware that my throat was tightening with every turn we made down the familiar streets. By noon, I was at the library, back at my desk. The room was filled with the smell of old books and floor polish. I stared at my calendar. Next week was our big literacy event. My name was on the flyers, the sign-up sheets, the volunteer email threads. My manager stopped by with a smile. "Your prep's been incredible, Anjelica, thank you." I nodded, heart thudding. Irene's words echoed again. "You don't even need this job, right?" Back at my desk, I opened a new document. Title: Termination of Financial Support. Draft. I didn't type anything else, just stared at the blinking cursor. That night, as I parked the car, Maura spoke without turning her head. "Aunt Jody said you should stay home, like she does. Then maybe you'd be useful." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I didn't raise my voice. "You know why I work, Maura?" She shook her head. "Because no one else here does." 2 days later, the credit union called. A small loan, $3,500. Taken out under my name, co-signed by Irene. I held the phone away from my ear. My face didn't change, but my pulse slammed in my neck. I dialed Irene. Voicemail. I didn't leave a message. That evening, she knocked on my door, holding a container of soup like it was penance. "You would have said yes anyway," she said, brushing past me like she lived there. "Don't make this a big thing." I stood in the hallway, arms at my sides. Maura stood halfway down the stairs, frozen. She heard. She saw. Irene didn't. That night, after Maura had gone to bed, I dug through the storage bin under my bed until I found it, my old external hard drive. Plugged it into my laptop, waited for the light to blink green. Inside, scanned receipts, appliance warranties, the deed to my apartment, email threads, screenshots, photos with timestamps. I created a new folder, Separation Prep Final, and started dragging files in. I wasn't just staying strong anymore. I was preparing to leave. And this time, I'd be taking the truth with me. It wasn't until I went to make Maura's bed that I noticed her pillow was gone. Her books had been moved too, stacked neatly in the corner like clutter to be cleared. A second set of sheets, covered in cartoon unicorns, now took up the center of the mattress. "Ari's been waking up at night," Irene said as she adjusted the curtains. "She needs comfort. Let her sleep between you two for now." There was no question in her voice, no room for conversation, just a new rule presented like a minor adjustment. Maura didn't ask anything. She just nodded, went to the closet, and changed into her pajamas. That night, Ari slept in the middle of the bed, snoring softly. Maura curled herself into the edge, facing the wall. The bed that used to be hers was now a border she wasn't allowed to cross. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of Ari's breath, and the silence coming from Maura's side. It reminded me of the summers I spent on the couch while Jody transitioned into her new room. I had been promised mine back. I never saw it again. The next morning I mentioned it over toast, just lightly. "Maybe we can put Ari in the guest room," I offered. "Maura's been losing sleep." Irene stirred her tea, eyes never lifting. "She's little. Don't make this about ego, Anjelica." Maura, seated across the table, folded her pajamas into a perfect square and placed them on her lap. Like hospital linens, clean, controlled, contained. I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't rage, not yet. That came later. That evening, Jody hosted one of her tea nights. Her friends arrived with too much perfume and too loud laughter. I stayed out of the way, helping Maura with her homework at the kitchen counter. When the noise grew too sharp, Maura collected the dishes like she always did. She moved quietly, invisible but efficient. One of Jody's friends pointed and chuckled. "Is she the house help?" The whole room laughed. Jody took a sip of tea, didn't miss a beat. "Close enough. She eats here for free." The room laughed harder. Not one voice corrected her. Not Irene. Not Victor. Not anyone. Maura didn't react. She just stood there, staring at her cup like she was waiting for it to shatter on its own. I stood, walked into the room, took the cup from Maura's hand and placed it back on the table. "You don't clear this," I said, voice even. "Not tonight." Jody raised an eyebrow. "If you treat my daughter like staff again," I continued, eyes locked with hers, "I won't wait for another dinner to leave." The room went still. No one laughed. And then slowly Maura looked up, first time in weeks, and nodded. It was the quiet that made me suspicious. Saturday afternoon I got home earlier than expected. The sky was a solid sheet of gray, and the house was strangely still. No TV blaring, no Irene humming off-key in the kitchen, No Victor asking Maura about her spelling tests. Just silence. I walked into the kitchen and set down my purse, opened my phone to check a recipe I'd bookmarked earlier, but muscle memory took me to Facebook first. I wasn't looking for anything, but I found everything. A photo caught my eye, my blender, my couch throw, my signature teal dish set stacked beside a gently used rice cooker. The caption read, "Decluttering, everything must go, we just have too much. Jody Clean TX." My name was blurred in the corner of a receipt visible in the frame. I didn't blink, didn't curse. Just let the stillness bloom behind my ribs. I walked through the house. The couch had been rearranged. The bookshelf looked different, lighter. The framed art I'd bought for Irene's birthday 2 years ago? Missing. The pantry was sparse. I opened the cabinets. Half of my cookware was gone. I opened the Facebook post again. Sold, pending pickup. It wasn't that anything was broken. It was that everything had been repurposed, rebranded, taken from gift to junk in a few taps and a photo filter. I scrolled further, heart flat in my chest. Another post. That air fryer? Came from someone trying too hard. We never needed it. 60 likes, 12 comments. 1 heart, small crimson, sat next to a name. Irene. I didn't feel rage. Not the hot, sharp kind. This was colder, a glacier kind of grief. The kind you don't scream about. The kind that makes you stare at your hands and wonder why they ever stayed open in the first place. The phone rang. Elisa. Her voice was low, hesitant. "I know this is bad timing, but I heard something at school pickup." I waited. I was behind Jody. She didn't see me. She was talking to someone about you. About Maura. My breath caught. She said, "If I got her out once, her kids know harder. One push and they both roll." The words didn't hit like a slap. They landed like confirmation. "You okay?" Elisa asked. I looked at the cabinets again. Empty, glossy, clean. I think I just found my answer. That night after Maura went to bed, I walked the house with my phone camera in hand. Item by item I recorded. The couch, the washer, the dishwasher, the coffee table, the mixer, the ceiling fan I'd installed last spring. Each clip was labeled and uploaded to a drive titled, "Inventory Mine." I opened the drawer beside my bed, pulled out the envelope I'd labeled months ago, just in case. Yellow. Inside was a copy of the lease I never signed, a moving checklist, printouts of receipts. I took out a pen and wrote across the front, "Activated." The call came at 9:42 p.m. I was in a hotel room in Dallas, the city humming softly beyond the window. I had just kicked off my heels when the screen lit up with Maura's name. I answered on the first ring. "She told me to get out," Maura whispered. Her voice cracked. "What?" "She yelled," she said. "She told me I was in the way. Then she locked the door." There was rain in the background. I imagined the porch light flickering, the damp cement beneath her sneakers, my daughter standing outside the house I'd paid to keep standing. "I'm cold," she said, softer this time. I didn't cry. I called Elisa. 15 minutes later, she texted, "Got her. She's safe." I stared at the ceiling. It looked just like the one in my childhood bedroom. Bland. Unbothered. The kind that doesn't know a war is happening under it. I tried calling Jody, voicemail. I called my mother. Irene answered like she hadn't been waiting, like she hadn't known. "This isn't working," she said, voice flat. "Maybe it's best you two find somewhere else." There was no pause, no hesitation, just the cold snap of a thread breaking. I booked the earliest flight home. When I got to Elisa's, Maura was asleep on the couch, arms wrapped around her backpack like a life preserver. Elisa pulled me aside in the kitchen. "There's more," she said. "Earlier today, your mom was talking to the neighbor. I was standing right there. She didn't see me." She hesitated. "She said she's tired of playing maid to your ungrateful daughter and her spoiled child." I didn't flinch. Didn't blink. "That tracks," I said. And that was that. The next morning I drove to the house. No text, no warning. Irene opened the door, surprised, but not speechless. I walked past her without a word. 10 minutes later, the moving truck pulled into the driveway. I handed the men a file. Receipts, itemized purchase lists, printed photos with dates. "Everything marked in yellow," I said. "Take it." They nodded and got to work. Irene hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, mouth tight. Victor stood at the bottom of the stairs, not saying a word. The kitchen emptied. The living room shrank. One by one, my belongings, my sacrifices, were packed into cardboard and carried out. I didn't cry. As the last box was lifted, Irene spoke. "And what about the mortgage?" I turned to her. "That's between you and the person you protected," I said. "Not cruel, not soft, just done." I stepped into the front yard. Maura was already in the car. She looked at me, didn't ask questions. This time I didn't look back. Sunday mornings didn't used to feel like this. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, pouring coffee into the mug Maura painted for me in 3rd grade, its crooked handle still holding on. She was at the toaster, waiting for her bagel to pop, humming something off-key and happy. The air was still, peaceful in a way that almost felt foreign. A cinnamon candle flickered on the windowsill, casting a soft glow on our new curtains. White ones, untouched by years of someone else's opinions. No raised voices, no slammed doors, just us. The phone buzzed once. A voicemail. From Irene. "Your sister left," she began, without preamble. "The mortgage is unpaid. We're losing the house." That was it. No greeting, no apology. Just the facts and the expectation that I'd swoop in. I didn't cry. I didn't delete it either. I saved it in a folder on my phone titled, "Never Again." Maura didn't ask about the call. She sliced strawberries for our plates and sprinkled them with sugar, same way I used to do for her when she was little. After breakfast, we finished setting up her bookshelf. A soft green one we found secondhand and painted together in the garage last weekend. She arranged her novels alphabetically, then pinned up photos above them. Beach days, her spelling bee trophy, a blurry selfie of us laughing with whipped cream on our noses. No one else made it onto that wall. And she didn't seem to mind. She held up one last photo, paused. "Do you think they'll ever ask why we left?" I looked at her quiet resilience. "They already knew," I said. "That's why they never stopped us." That afternoon at the library, a regular patron, Mr. Keller, always wearing mismatched socks, asked while checking out his novels, "How's your family?" I hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Smaller," I said, "but better." As I walked past the front entrance, I saw a charity bin set up for holiday toy donations. I reached into my tote bag, pulled out a hoodie. Teal, brand new, never worn. I folded it neatly and placed it on top of the pile. That night, Maura fell asleep on the couch, her feet tucked under the blanket with embroidered words I once gave her. "You are safe. You are strong. You are loved." I watched her breathe. I didn't feel triumphant. No surge of justice or revenge. Just stillness. And that was enough. I sat beside her, brushed her hair back from her forehead, and whispered into the quiet. This time I didn't leave quiet. I left whole. I don't know if they ever felt the silence I left behind, but I hope they hear it every time they sit at that empty table. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's clarity. I used to think being silent made me strong, that if I endured enough, they'd see my worth. But the truth is, some people only value what they can take from you. Leaving wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate, and it saved me. More importantly, it saved my daughter from learning that love should feel like negotiation. To anyone watching this who's ever been the one to keep the peace at the cost of your own, know this. Peace isn't peace if it breaks you. Have you ever had to cut ties with someone you once called family? Or set a boundary no one respected until you enforced it? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this video spoke to your heart, even just a little, drop a 1 in the comments, or let me know where you're watching from. If it didn't, tell me why. Tell me what you'd do differently. And if you'd like to hear more real stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories find the people who need them most. I'll be here, sharing, healing, and hoping with you. See you in the next story.